Welcome to the Lebra Podcast, where education leaders explore the intersection of culture, strategy, and innovation in today's schools. I'm your host, Nate Lichte, and in each episode, we'll uncover the leadership habits, systems, and bold ideas that help districts thrive.
Dr. Barbara Mullen, thank you so much for sitting down and sharing your time with us today. We've known each other for quite a little while now.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of meeting at some different conferences and events, but maybe for our, the podcast listeners who don't know you, would you mind introducing yourself and maybe tell them a little bit about what led you to the superintendency?
Absolutely. The hardest thing about podcasts is that you don't know where to look. So you're like looking at yourself. You're like, you're like look at the camera. So my name is Barbara. I am the superintendent of Rush-Henrietta Central School District, Rush-Henrietta. I was told very early on, keep the hyphen in. It is very, very important.
Yeah.
And it's a part of the identity of the community, which is celebrating 80 years as a district this year in November. So we'll have a whole lot of really great things happening with that. But I came to this job in a couple of different roles. I started as a special education teacher in the classroom. Um, Always had the question, who gets to decide what high quality instructional experiences are for kids and who makes the decision? That
Yeah.
has been my question, my you know, theory of action, my probing question, my research question, my whole career. And every time it was answered, the building leader, the coach, the special ed, coach, the special ed director, the specialist, the assistant superintendent of student family services and of special services, the superintendent, that I was like, oh, okay, then that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
And even as a superintendent, it's now not necessarily I make the decision and therefore it is so. It has become I am responsible. And so how do I create the conditions for adults to do their best work and make good decisions for kids and give them high quality instruction that lifts the ceiling on what's possible for them. And so those roles have been my trajectory. Spoiler alert, I did start in public relations. My undergrad is in journalism and mass comm. And so I had like a really interesting kind of early 20s career in entertainment PR and consumer brands PR and nonprofit messaging. And so I use all those skills. I probably use them the most now.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit of my journey to this seat. And it's 3 years down. And I don't wanna say forever to go. You can't do this job forever, but, it's been a great 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Rush-Henrietta, the demographics, the makeup. I'm familiar with it obviously because we've known each other for a little bit, but for
Yeah.
folks that maybe aren't familiar with New York, where it's located, give them a little background as we kind of dive into talking about some of the great things that are happening in the district.
So we are on our, 2nd year of our strategic plan Vision 2037, and I lead with that because this is a community that, again, 80 years old. We are right outside of Rochester, New York. We're a first-ring suburb. We're consolidated district, so we're made up of 4 towns. So Rush, Henrietta, Brighton, and a little bit of Brighton, a little bit of Pittsford, New York, and we sit literally we abut Rochester City. And so we are just kind of an extension of the city in many ways. We have a very deep legacy of Xerox and Kodak. Those are the big titans that were in the industry and the community. Now, a whole lot less Kodak. I think I don't have to tell anybody for obvious reasons why. A little bit of Xerox. Xerox is still here in many ways, but we're more around optics, applied manufacturing. There's a lot of work here in the trades. A lot of things you don't even think about are made here, like the boxes when you get a box lunch, those little cardboard boxes, they're made here.
Wow. Like,
I know, there's just like tissue boxes are made here, like all of those different really interesting things that have an interesting utility, but you don't know those companies are here and more are moving here too. So very interesting industry hub. We are a diverse district and community. We're about 52% students of color. We're 51% students who come from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds and need. We have a very quickly growing English as a language, new language community, mostly because of the designation of the sanctuary city of Rochester. And so we have a lot of families that come here and then relocate to Henrietta because it is still an affordable place to live in the county. And gosh, we just have some amazing kids. I don't know to tell you. Like we're part like Pleasantville in many ways, and then part like think of the coolest, like, urban center that we have some of that vibe too, because we just have kids that come from all over and adults that come from all over and find their way here. We are about 5.5 hours north of New York City. So if you're gonna come to New York, like, I'll wave, but I'm not coming to visit because it's it's a whole day driving. But people come up here from there, right? For
Yeah.
affordability, a lot of other reasons. And we outpace the state in a lot of our outcomes, but we're not satisfied. So we still push towards continuous improvement. We have insanely dedicated staff because your teacher could also be an alumni who's also a parent in the
Oh, wow.
district. And again, it's just a really unique community that wants to lead with you. Sometimes I get in trouble though, because they're like, you didn't tell us about that thing. We wanted to decide too. And I was like, I'm sorry. Okay, let me circle back. But I appreciate that about this community because they keep me on my toes and they make sure that I'm always considering everybody's voice.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I want to jump right in and kind of transition a little bit because you've got a book. You've been working on this book, and I would love to kind of introduce people to it. And it's on healing centered leadership in schools.
Yes.
So talk to us and tell us. Well, one, tell us a little bit about the book and what really inspired you to focus on healing as a central practice in leadership.
So I can tell you like a very quick story, which I always lead with. I worked in another district and you don't have to guess. Like my resume is public, it's on my LinkedIn. But I worked in several other districts. And no dish to people who were leaders. All the leaders have all turned over by now. So nobody's gonna take it personally. But one of the things I noticed in the really, really massive, like fourth largest district I ever worked in, it's the largest district in the nation. I noticed that um there was always this proxy for power, and that's everywhere. Education is inherently political, right? So it is just going to always be this tug of war in terms of like power and safety and proximity to power, because there is a lot of harm that happens, whether it's policies, leadership changes, change of practice, and people get harmed. I mean, to be
Yeah.
human is to harm people. It happens. And what I noticed was there was this shift of focus from children when these things happen, but always in the name of children, right? Like, we're gonna do this thing because it's good for kids, but it didn't never had anything to do with kids.
Yeah.
And so I experienced a lot of harm working in that system. And when I left, I went to a new job that was like a smaller, like I took a break from working in big districts because I was in Chicago, Seattle, this Houston's huge system. And I took a break and I said, like, I just need to figure out like why it hurts so much to care for kids. Like, why does it
Yeah.
hurt so much to do good work for kids? And so when I went to this organization, I had an executive, nonprofit. I had an executive director ask to see my calendar. And I never gave her my calendar. I just never gave her permission. And she was like, okay, so Barbara, I've asked to see your calendar. Why won't you let me see it? And I was just like, caught me red-handed. And I said, when I was at this other place, my supervisor asked to see my calendar and they would like use it to harm me, to micromanage me. They would cancel things if they thought I shouldn't be there or meet with these people. And so when she said that, she was kind of like, "Well, I'm not gonna do that. I just wanna collaborate. I wanna protect your time. I wanna, like, know where you're at. So if I'm trying to schedule something with you, I could be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is important. She needs to be here, whatever.'" And so I said, "Well, I know, but I'm still trying to, like, know you." And she said, "Well, Barbara, I don't know what happened in another place, but you can't lead from, like, pain. You can't lead from a place of trauma and pain. You're gonna have to heal that."
Yeah.
Boom, that was like my first like trigger in my mind of like, oh gosh, she's right. Because it's hurting our relationship and it's also harming our ability organizationally and infrastructurally to do work efficiently together. And so that was always in the back of my mind. Fast forward to another organization I worked in. We were in a turnaround situation and a takeover, not a secret. You can see it on my CV. And I began to think about this notion of turnaround takeover. I've worked in turnaround context takeover. It's my jam, but I also don't like to use that language because it subscribes to this notion that a community can't take care of itself. It's very patriarchal and
Yeah.
patrilineal, right? And it's just very um paternalistic, like daddy knows best. Like, don't worry, community, we will take it from here. And in many ways, it takes agency away from a community and it takes their own efficacy and their own belief in themselves to do great work and to fight for their kids. And so, even though I do believe it was a great decision to be a part of a turnaround transformation team, I started to ask myself this question: what does it look like for a community to heal itself? Like, ineffective practices, terrible scores, student outcomes, all these other things are true in a system, but it's because these are harmful practices. So now, like, restructuring the way we talk about turnaround, transformation, takeover from harm and healing is just a completely different cognitive process when you approach it that way.
Yeah.
And it allows you to have this set of heuristic kind of rules that you subscribe to when you're entering conversations with people. And so this book is really like, I mean, it's like 10 years in the making, because that's when I first experienced that organizational harm and I didn't have a name for it, to fast forward having grown up with starting to be able to put a name to these practices. And now in my role today, that is how I lead. And it doesn't mean I don't harm. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean people are happy with me, right? Like, my biggest like fear right now, anxiety, is that the book comes out and then people get on the internet and be like, she full of crap. Like, and I'm like, I fully recognize that there will, but I talk about that.
Yeah.
I talk about how do you have spaces to name that something harms you, and like, how do you create this infrastructure to be able to mitigate it or address it?
That's so fascinating. So, and you know a little bit of my background that, and I've across my career, I've worked with some leaders that, we all have, right? We have great leaders and then we have some not so great leaders that we just get the privilege of working with that teach us better not what not to do. Right. And, but you sort of, and I've talked about this with folks, when you leave that organization, depending on how long you're there, that sort of thing, you sort of develop PTSD, right? Like from that style of leadership, which when you were first talking about the situation with your calendar, that's exactly what it reminded me as is of those kind of intrapersonal, PTSD moments where
Yes.
you catch yourself bringing in situations into a new leadership role that you have. So, and then I want to jump to this community section here a little bit too that you talked about a community healing itself within. But give us a little bit more insights on maybe how you overcome, right? Like there's so many of us that have that. When you're leading over the course of a time, you just see this, and we all kind of get into those moments where, from a personal standpoint, we do have to heal within, so that we can lead better. Is there anything in the book or anything you've experienced that has really helped to, get to that next step so that you could be a stronger leader?
Absolutely. So I'll talk about three things in particular. So in the book, the healing centered leadership text is the text, right? And if you like to read, congratulations, there's a book. If you're like, give chunk it for me, there's a framework. The rooted leadership framework is about these three distinct areas: personal healing, interpersonal healing, and organizational healing. The personal healing piece is all about me. It's all about, I mean, I'm not, this is not a like autobiography. So you're not going to hear a whole lot of like me in this place, but what I will say is that is the area that I had to start with first, because it does talk about like how you ground yourself, what you're rooted in, what are the things that are inside of you that you're carrying that will come out of you when you least expect it. And I always name Leslie Fenwick, who is the dean emeritus at the Howard School of Education. And when I was in my superintendent program there, she said, leadership is pressurized. It squeezes you like a tube of toothpaste. What is in you will come out of you when you're squeezed. And you don't get to decide when that is. You don't get to say, I think I'll let like, it is just going to happen in a board meeting, in a public comment session, in a community forum, in your inbox during budget season. And so you have to go back to what grounds you as a person and the things you know to be true about yourself, the things you know about your leadership, the truth about your intentions, and owning your impact. Like, all of
Yeah.
those things have to be very, very clear before you go into leadership. And so the personal healing component of the rooted leadership framework is really about that. And it's about the fact that this is relentless work. This
Yeah.
is work that never stops. It never turns off. As very candidly, I had a text message thread with my board chair yesterday, and I said, I saw this, I noticed this. Um, this was like 6 o'clock at night. I said, I will respond tomorrow because today I don't have anything left. Like,
Yeah.
I just need a minute. And he was like, cool, I got it. Like, teamwork. But before you take a superintendency, you got to see how these people play in the sandbox to even know if you're going to be able to have that relationship with your boss as a superintendent. And then two, you've got to be able to say what you need, right? You've got to be able to say that. And there's a level of vulnerability that has to come with that. There's self-awareness. You can't just keep the superwoman, superman, super person cape on because it will kill you. And so much of the personal piece is about unpacking your professional harm. When these things happen, are you triggered? How do you need to care for yourself? The other piece is I talk about this in a section around professional health, and I'm going to be sharing this in the summer at another convening. But I am an athlete in many ways. I've completed multiple marathons, triathlons, and like now my kind of flavor of the week is Pilates like certification. Not because I'm going to quit and go be a Pilates, like I don't have time for that instructor, but I'm very, very interested in this particular discipline of fitness because I have found it to be the most integral in managing stress, managing chronic stress, managing chronic persistent stress that manifests itself in like mind body connection. And so in my mind, like I protect that space at all costs because it will never return void. The
Yeah.
time I spend on the mat, the time I spend doing Pilates, the time I spend focusing on it will never come back void. It is something that will always return on that investment because this is a job that if it doesn't just build, like it doesn't like, oh, I'm sick today or I have a bad day. It is compounded in your body over time. There are people who have left this seat and like within months or weeks or a year of their retirement have died.
Yeah.
And it's just the truth. You know, I don't say to be scary to people, but it's the truth because they have had their body has taken a toll on them. And they're like, oh, great, you're finished with that. I think you could check out now. And you're like, wait, I'm
Right.
supposed to be on a cruise. You
Yeah.
know, so I'm very conscientious of that and how people show up in that first chapter, or really it's like
Yeah.
chapter 2, but in that first section.
I mean, there's so many things about what you said there, which is so good. Specifically, the kind of, the analogy of as a leader, you're a tube of toothpaste, right? I love that connection to why it's so important to make sure, you put your own oxygen mask on, you really find out what grounds and centers you, what the why is, those sort of things. So, and I know you've done a lot of work about creating, coaching and mentoring and professional learning communities to really kind of grow the next generation of leaders from within. So I want to connect the dots here. So talk to me, we've just talked about kind of this development of leadership personas and just kind of supporting from a personal piece. But how are you doing that with your own leaders within? How are you, is there any best practices or, what are the coaching and mentoring structures that you kind of implemented there to support those leaders within your own organization?
Yeah, so we have really great labor partners here. Our Association of Administrators, and then our Teacher Association here both have internal mentoring infrastructure. So everybody that comes in gets paired with a mentor teacher or a mentor administrator who just knows the system. Like sometimes you're just like, where's the pencil sharpener, right? So we do have that internal structure, which I really appreciate, and we're very thoughtful. Like my president of that union is always kind of like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And something like that would be a great pair. But what we set up when I first got here, because we did not have an internal leadership pipeline. Like we just were kind of like, you've been here the longest, maybe you get to be right. But people were not coming to the seat, to the principalship ready in my mind for like
Wow.
what it meant. We have some great like seasoned educators and leaders. Many of them have come from other districts. So they weren't like straight from the classroom here. Some of them have come from other places and then took the job and then have now grown and been in the district a while. So we created this thing called L3, right? Learning Leadership Lab or Leadership Learning Lab. I always mix it up. Where aspiring teacher leaders can kind of get a taste of what administration looks like. Some of them are in their administrative credentialing process. So we don't have like an agreement with a higher ed partner, but some of them are already in that process. So they're kind of like great, I know theory, but what does it look like to lead in RH? What are the expectations? And we use a leading for equity framework called the core leadership practices that we all align to subscribe to common language around leadership. And
Yeah.
so they get a taste of that. It's about 6 sessions over the course of a year that they can sign up in a cohort. And we just allow for them to, continue to thrive, grow, and say, we want to lead. We've hired an assistant principal out of that cohort. We have had someone else go off to become another administrator somewhere else out of that cohort, which is fine with me. I'm like, we gonna always have a job openings, but if you lead somewhere else, I count you as my leadership tree,
Yeah.
right? As long as you do a good job. If you don't do a good job, I don't know you. But 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 we built that because I felt it was important. And then we set up our professional learning communities. Before, people were just kind of meeting and they were like, "Hey, we're going to meet
Yeah.
to talk about the logistics." We've set up professional learning communities for our assistant principals and for our principals that meet every month. And the reason we do that is because we're building your capacity to lead. We're building a capacity to do this work, to see what we see, to be alignment, to think about instructional leadership in a way, to think about problems of practice in a way that will grow your leadership, help you grapple, and give you community with these areas, right? It's not supposed to be, these are all the things that we're telling you you need to do. These are the key areas that you're growing, that you're lifting in your work. And now we're moving it to our teams. We have instructional leadership teams at the schools, which some superintendents might be like, y'all just not getting that. Yeah, it's like 15,000 school districts and everybody's not on the same page.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're just now getting there, building that team. And it has been a game changer, particularly for teachers who are like, oh, this is what it looks like to create systems for change in a school.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, those pieces to, well, one, we both know that, just the sort of lack of developing leaders we have to fill the vacant seats that are in the superintendency, that are in administration throughout our districts. We're in this kind of crunch right now. So to look at internally and figure out how we can do better jobs as district to do that is one of the most critical and important things, I think, for us today. The other thing I want to go back to is we started to talk about, a piece of your book was kind of this organizational healing. And then I know that you've done a ton of work when you kind of got there. You've developed this, pretty ambitious Vision 2037 strategic plan that really, you know, takes and has some ambitious goals, but it's really about putting concrete action at the building and classroom level. So talk to us a little bit about, organizational healing and this and your strategic plan development. Did those two things kind of intersect when you came there, since you were kind of working on all of this together?
So they did. And I would say when I got here, I'm gonna always talk about politics because that's this. It's big P politics, little P politics, right? Policy, laws, local, national, state, all of that. And then it's little P, like PTOs, moms, teachers, all of that is all
Yeah.
politics. And so when I got here in 2023, I know I had 18 months to define a vision for this district, to set a course, because I really did not know how the fall of 2024 was going to look.
Yeah.
We all know how the fall of 2024 looked now. And I'm so grateful I did because I am a African American woman, and it's as a superintendent. I'm the first one superintendent of this district. And again, we're a diverse community, but we're also across the political spectrum.
Yeah.
And so people think differently about me in different ways. And like most of it is none of my business, but some of it does impact the leadership, it impacts the work, and impacts the community. We have a great support. But what I wanted was, I did not want the politics of the day to determine the direction of the district, because that is harmful for kids.
Yeah.
And if you see across the nation, when we talk about culture wars that kind of came out of 2020 and 2021, and the shift in the political scene at that time, and the blowback really for the last 10 years, like if we don't be honest with each other, like that has named the orders of the day for kids, and it still is, right? In any given day, it's whatever the new controversy is, whatever people's political leaning are, they're going to take something that's happening in schools that they don't like, and that's going to be the national conversation. And that's going to determine who runs for school board. And that's going to determine the superintendent in the seat. And that's going to determine what kids have access to what things. And so when I came in, I said, I have 18 months to, one, build community authentically, like I live here, my kids are here, I bought a house here, like to really avail myself in an authentic way. And I'm not saying everybody got to do that, but that was my journey.
Yeah.
And to galvanize the community in a way that brings them to the table to say what it is you want. Because if you have a problem with what I'm doing, then let's go back to what we said we were going to do. That's all I'm doing. I am doing what we said we were going to do. I'm not coming up with nothing different, nothing crazy, nothing outlandish. I am doing what the community said we wanted to do in this strategic plan. And I
Right.
even got pushback ahead of the budget and all these other things that people don't like, how I'm moving, what I'm moving, whatever. And that's fine. But one thing that they said was, we like that we have a strategic plan. We just want to be at the table or we want something, whatever. And okay, we could talk about that. But at the end of the day, you know that we brought the strategic plan together. And in my mind, that's a much clearer entry point into the conversations about the work, and it keeps us close to kids. It keeps us really close to kids. It don't have nothing to do with my personality. It don't have anything to do with me politically, how I show up in my identities. It doesn't have anything to do with what you assume my political leanings are because I don't make those known. I don't make those clear. I'm an advocate for children.
Yeah.
And so the Vision 2037 is about what does this community value outside of the noise?
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of noise. But what do we value outside of the noise? Because if that's not the conversation we're having, then let's have that conversation. Because you don't know, like, people are there, this is not their job, right? Everybody went to school, so they think they know how to run schools. You don't. You
Yeah.
don't know how to run schools. But I can tell you what you said you wanted, and let's go back to that. So that's why that work is important. And that's also why progress monitoring on this work is really important too. Because if we're not progress monitoring publicly on this work, then it's just a soundbite, right? It's a cute little document and a framework.
That there's a couple things you said there that I think are so important for folks that are, developing a strategic plan currently, or they're entering a superintendency and will be in the next 18, 24 months. That foundational trust, authentic trust and vulnerability that you're building with the community becomes so important and beneficial when you get towards this, not only the development to kind of capture all that buy-in, but also the achieving of that strategic plan, right? Like that's how you're going to resonate with the community and ensure and execute and that sort of thing. That's such an important piece towards actualization of it, especially with external community partners. But let's shift gears a little bit since we've talked a lot about this 2037 vision from an external perspective. And let's talk about internal. One of the biggest things is, okay, so we've built the strategic plan, right? We've collaborated with principals, teachers, students, community partners, got this documented. We've defined the vision, the goals. How do you equip and enable your internal leaders, your principals, to understand how these goals, are executed in their buildings?
So I think the biggest challenge is always implementation, right?
Yeah.
So we have a couple of guidance documents, the pyramid or the like scaffolding. The scaffolding around how we cascade this work out is we have our district improvement plan, we have our program improvement plans, that is the central office kind of core work, how we measure effectively. And then we have the school improvement plans. The school improvement plans must align to the district improvement plans and the overall strategic plan. So every building gets to use their data. They get to decide like what are their key levers that they want to do. How do they come back to this work? Every year we have beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year walkthroughs that allow schools to like monitor their strategic plan. And that is really where the principals live. Our deputy superintendent monitors the way that the strategic plan shows up in the buildings. We
Yeah.
don't necessarily, I don't go to every single one. I really haven't been to a whole lot, but I pick and choose and go to some of them because the principals are presenting on their strategic plan. They're presenting on their work. And I'm trusting and believing like, okay, before they used to do their school improvement plans, they would meet with the assistant superintendent of instruction and the superintendent, and they would just be like, here's my school improvement plan. And
Yeah.
then they would go, oh, okay, that's great. And then that would be it. Never to be heard or seen from again. No data, no, just like, here's a document. And I was like, this is not how you do school improvement. This is how you do school, keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep the lights on, cool. But when I got here, The reading level for students grades 3 through 8 was 47%. 47% of our students were proficient in reading. Like 59% are now in 3 years. So we have surpassed pre-pandemic levels. And that's important. Students with disabilities are up 19%. So I was like, I get it. I know you're not happy, and that's cool. And maybe it's a challenge, and maybe it's different. But we're going to keep the course, right? We're going to steady the course. And so a lot of the like curriculum adoption, all these other things are a part of what does it look like on the ground.
Yeah.
And I got even a lot of flack around bringing in a deputy superintendent because principals reported to the superintendent in years past. Superintendent job ain't that, right? It is not that right now. And so really what's important is making sure that the school work is happening, that it is happening in the classrooms. Teachers have the support they need. They're clear about the standards. They're clear about what they're monitoring. They're clear about how it's going. And that's the strategic plan's work,
Yeah.
right? So much of it is those cascading and alignment document. We're reading a text called Strategy in Action. It's another Elizabeth City text out of Harvard. And it really is, how do you take strategy and move it into practice? And what does it look like at your executive level to keep your eyes on that prize?
Yeah. Gosh, that's so important. Um, well, I want to kind of wrap up and thank you again so much for sitting down with me today and
Of
just
course.
sharing more about the book, which I'm excited to get my hands on it. And just some of the great things that are happening in Rush-Henrietta. As we close out, I always like to ask folks, to share a little piece of advice for folks that are considering the superintendency, and for those that are, we have some of the one of the largest, I think, cohort of new superintendents in their first year this year. So it's a big role. What advice would you give to any of these folks that are in their first year or considering the seat?
Well, first I would say, whenever the book come out, get it. Not because I want you to buy a book. Like, I trust and believe people don't make money off books. Like, it is not, I'm not trying to get rich off the book. But what I do think is in there is this notion, right, that leadership is pressurized. And you have to have a very grounded sense of what has happened to you to get to this seat. Nobody gets to this seat unscathed at all. And I do think it's important because what it does is it allows for you to show up in a way and in service to your staff that you don't think you need to. You don't anticipate it. No other role is like this. No other role has the power, the possibility, the privilege that the superintendency has to both deeply impact the lives of students, change the trajectory of their lives, and deeply impact the lives of the adults that serve them. And
Yeah.
so I always I tell folks, if you don't love adults, if you don't see the promise and possibility in the grown-ups the same way you see them as in kids, do not take this job because this seat is about loving grown-ups.
Yep.
It is about loving grown-ups who love kids so deeply, so relentlessly, so impossibly that it takes so much out of you. But you have to keep showing up every day saying, God, dog, I love you so much that I'm willing to die on the altar of my ego because I know that you are going to do great things for kids if you could unlock your greatness.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the call of leadership, and,
Oh,
and authentic leadership is, you
it's
know,
my like fourth espresso. That's why I'm crying.
well, Barb, again, thank you so much for joining us and just sharing, uh, you know, your thoughts, backgrounds, insights on leadership, specifically, healing center leadership. Um, and hopefully we'll have you back on and talk more about the book and the district, here in a few months or so.
Yay. Thank you, Nate. Absolutely love talking to you. And don't make me cry next time.
No promises.
Uh, Thank you.
Thank you.